everyone. In this painting, I go over layering. We also talk a lot about the wet on dry technique and blending and smoothing to get some highlights. Then we also talk about the second layer where we can really just make our picture pop and be very vibrant. Let's get started. To get started with this bow, I like to paint bows and work in sections. I don't like to just paint over top, which you can. I'm going to come in with my red. I'm going to do this a very nice festive bow. And I'm going to come in and just paint this bow. I'm doing the wet on wet technique here, the wet on dry technique here, where I am applying wet paint onto a dry surface. My colors will be more vibrant this way. Okay, so you're gonna see I left the middle nice and open. I have a damp brush that's clean, has no color, and just touching the edges, I'm gonna blend this out. You're seeing I'm not going into the middle part, I'm literally just touching my edges. I'm gonna get rid of everything on my brush again, and I'm gonna keep doing this until I'm happy with the blend. I'm leaving negative space, which is just the white space of my paper here. I'm gonna make this actually a little smaller. But I'm not coming into my middle. I want there to be white space. So now I'm gonna mix in a little bit of a darker color. I'm gonna mix a nice maroon with some purple, red, and indigo, and I'm just gonna touch my centers. And that's the wet on wet technique here, where there's a wet surface touching another wet surface, and you'll see it just expanded. That's how we can create some soft blends between our colors. And I'm using that same maroon color towards my edges, just to give it a little bit of curve. So I'm gonna repeat this on this side. So I'm gonna come in with my red. And mostly where this little part is, that's where I want my highlight to be. So I'm gonna paint about a quarter in here. So I'm using Arches watercolor paper, which is a really good watercolor paper. It holds its water really well. If you're using a beginner watercolor paper, this will tend to dry pretty fast on you. So just maybe work in sections. Edit that part out. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of everything on my brush. And I'm gonna keep doing this until I'm happy with my blend. So I'm gonna come in now and do my shadow part. If you are finding that this is not expanding, it has already dried, just use a damp brush and you can just move around that color and just break up the harsh line like we did over here. I'm using Arches watercolor paper. It's really good at holding its water, but if you're using a very beginner friendly paper, it might not hold the water, so it might dry a little faster than my paper. So I'm not gonna be touching my middle because again, with that wet on wet technique, all the colors will just expand and go crazy. So I'm gonna give that a little bit of a rest. So I'm gonna work my way down here. And I want there to be a highlight and a shadow. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of everything on my brush. And I'm gonna start touching that line and blending out. Whenever you see that you're just dragging the color around, that's a good time to tap your brush and get rid of some of that water and paint on your brush. And then again, with this darker color, I'm going to be touching my inner part. Just different points of my bow. Definitely in here where the little knot should be, I'm going to just shadow. And repeat on the other side. Hold on, I gotta just blend this out a little bit more. I don't like how it's drying. Okay. Get rid of everything on my brush. Just touching this line right here. So now that these top two parts are dry, oh, sorry, I almost forgot to shadow it. Using that wet on wet technique here. I'm gonna be shadowing my inside here. Okay, great. Okay, I am going to just dry this section right here so I can move on. And then with a darker color that I have been using to shadow, I'm going to come in underneath and just have this be darker. And because I've also let this area dry, with the wet on dry technique, it does just sit on top. So if I was to come over and paint over top here, you will see a nice crease and line so all the colors just aren't bleeding and blending everywhere. So this is what I'm talking about right here. It's not bleeding and blending when I'm touching that top bow part. It's just sitting on top of it, so you can see a nice crease and line between the inside ribbon and the top of the ribbon. And totally optional, you can have a damp brush and you can just scoop up a little bit on the inside just to give it a little bit of depth. You don't have to do that, but just helps give it a bit of depth. Now, the last part is the bow, and you have guessed it, we're gonna do the same technique. It's gonna be a little tricky because the bow is smaller, but we're gonna come in and just basically painting a little box. We wanna make sure the box is pretty big, that way we have enough space to kind of blend and bleed and have that transition. There we go, blended out that line. Now I'm gonna grab that darker color and I'm just gonna touch the edges in here and let that bleed. And there we go. This is how you can paint a nice realistic bow. Another fun thing that we can do here, and I was kind of talking about it right here with the wet on dry technique. So once all of this is dry, these three parts are still wet, we can actually go in with a second layer and just paint over top. And because the shadows are underneath, whatever red I put on top will shine through. That's called underpainting, and I can show you. If you're happy with how this looks, you don't have to do this, but we can come in with the red and we can come in and you'll see right here where I just painted is already darker than the rest of the color. In this part right here, it's already lighter because there was no color there at all. And I'm just gonna scoop up to make this highlight more predominant. So now you can see that this red is a lot more vibrant. I still have my shadow, I still have my highlight there even before I scooped it. So it's really cool. Watercolor, it's definitely a really cool medium. And I'm gonna do it again. I can still see all of my shadows. And I am going to scoop for my highlight just because I like my highlight being a lot more apparent. And I'm going to dry this and move on to the next part. See? You can see all my lines under it. You can see my highlighted area. You can see my shadowed area. It's really cool. Get rid of everything on my brush. Scoop up for a highlight. Scoop up for a highlight. And right in here, I'm gonna scoop up. So adding that second layer just changes a lot. Changes how the whole bow just looked. I hope that you had fun with this explanation, enjoyed painting. Please like and subscribe and check out my other videos. Happy painting, friends.